Hello, my name is Shad Mickelberry with Jackal Software. Today I'm going to walk through how you can use SuiteCRM Workflow and a background updater add-on that we developed to track KPIs. In this case, we're going to track a days in sales stage KPI for opportunities. To do that, we created a handful of fields on the opportunities module. Just walking through them real quick, we have a today field that's just a current timestamp. We have a date closed field that we have a workflow that'll set that date when an opportunity is moved to either closed won or closed lost. We have the date opened, which in this case is just going to be the date the opportunity was created. You may define this differently. Maybe instead of identified, you identify the date opportunity was opened as when it was proposed or a quote sent. Or you may have multiple of these fields and track different days. Maybe it went from open to proposed and then proposed to closed. With the same workflow, you can expand on it to achieve quite a few different functionalities. And there is more than one way to achieve this. We're just going to give the example here with the built-in tools. We also have a days open, which is the actual integer field. That will be either the date difference from when the opportunity was open to the current date, or if it's closed, the date's difference between when the opportunity was opened and the close date. Lastly, we have a checkbox that we're going to use for our workflow and background updater to designate records that have already been updated. Since this is an integer of days, we only need this to run one time per day. We do not want to just continually update records in the background. Walking through the workflows first, there's a simple workflow that will just go through and update the today field. There's a condition where it's that today field is not equal to the current date. We do need to have repeated runs checked. This potentially could be run on the scheduler, but because we need the repeated runs, this would run continually. So we're actually going to use background updater to keep these updated, which we'll demonstrate in a moment. We have the date open workflow. Again, this is just setting the record from the date modified. This may be in a different scenario when it moves to a certain sales stage, or maybe you have interim dates that you're trying to track. But in this example, we're just going to go from the date opened. One of the reasons for this, instead of just using the date entered field, is we want this field to be a date field. Using a date time and a date field can cause issues where you may get unexpected results. The workflow we have, and there's another one for set the date close date that I mentioned, and this essentially when the sales stage is either closed won or closed lost, we're gonna set the days, set the date stamp, the close date field. We're gonna date stamp the close date field. Again, in this case, we do not want repeated runs checked, or every time this saves, we will this date will be incremented. Lastly, we have the calculate days open workflow. I'm going to open this up into edit mode so we can walk through a little more closely. This is going to run only on save. Again, we do need the repeated runs checked, and we are going to also use background updater to keep this workflow working and updating every record that needs one time. And to do this, we set a condition here. We want to make sure that the today field has been updated already, so we do a quick check here. We also are going to use the set action of calculate fields. And when you're using calculate fields, there's some documentation here. I'll put this in the notes. It has all the available functions. We're going to use primarily the date diff function, which takes two dates and then an output. In this case, we're going to use days. And we're also going to use the if then else logical operator to check if it's closed or not. So when you're using calculated fields, you, instead of entering the actual field name in the formula, we use parameters. So we just had to create a handful of parameters. We have today, sales stage, date closed, date opened, And I'll post this function, this formula in the notes as well. But essentially it's saying we do a logical check if the sales stage, which is the P2 parameter, is either closed won or closed lost, then we're going to use the date diff to calculate P4, which is date opened, and the close date, which is P3. Otherwise, for everything else, it's going to be the date opened compared to today. Lastly, we're actually going to make sure that the age process checkbox is checked. The set today, I don't believe I showed it, but the set today workflow actually unchecks this field, designating that the records that need to have the sales stage updated. Next, I want to walk through the two background updater processes we have. Essentially, we developed this product because we find there's a lot of instances where we need our records to be saved or updated every day for either workflows or logic hooks or some other type of custom coding that's on a module to be ran. So the way we do this is we actually have this set. They're both going to be running on opportunities. We can run them in batches, so if you have a large number of records, you can set the number to run in an individual run. And we also have a priority where all the records in a given priority or process order will run before the next ones. In this case, we do need all of the today fields to be updated first before we can calculate and get an accurate calculation on the sales stage calculation. I'm doing a custom query on this example, and essentially this is just making sure to grab records where the today field is less than the current date or blank. So if we just were to implement this, we would want to go ahead and backdate those records. If you do not have developer override checked, essentially what that background updater will do is just look at records that have not been modified in the last 24 hours, which may work just fine for your example. The next updater we have this to set to process order 2, so all of the records in the first selection will be completed before this one will run. So and this is essentially the opposite, where we're looking at records where the today field is the current date and the age processed checkbox is set to 0, which means unchecked in the database. And this allows us, the background updater, to update every record once and not continually update the records, because the scheduler for this job is set to run every 15 minutes by default, and we wouldn't want records needlessly updated in the background. What this looks like from a results standpoint is there's an example of an opportunity that's still open. It's in proposal. It was opened on 8/30/2018. The current date is February 13th, 2020. And there's 530 days in between these two dates. Now, obviously, we probably wouldn't want this long of a turn time in your sales organization, but this is just demonstrating where another opportunity we have. We go to one that's closed. This was closed on 2/10/2020. We see we have 529 days open. So this is just a quick example. You may have additional differentiators or milestones that you're tracking. Another example where you could use a similar functionality is for leads or contacts to track the number of days since they've been contacted or had a meeting or call scheduled with them or completed. You could use a very similar functionality to track that. So please comment if you have any questions down below, and thank you for listening.